Natan was never loved by his parents. He grew up amidst indifference and loneliness. His parents, Michele and John, were ambitious young university students, more concerned with working and earning money for multiple trips and buying imported cars. Their big dreams and plans fell apart with the news of an unwanted pregnancy. Amidst despair, Natan's grandparents made a proposal to take care of their grandson until his parents were ready. Natan grew up surrounded by his grandparents' love and affection, but at the age of 5, everything changed. He moved in with his parents, who were more focused on work and money than on their own child. Natan, who had previously been surrounded by his grandparents' love, had to face the true nature of his parents. Rejection and indifference became constants in this boy's life. They saw Natan as an obstacle in their perfect lives and treated him as a burden. Without receiving the love and attention he deserved, Natan began to feel the pain of coldness and disdain. Keep following this story, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. John and Michele have always been extremely dedicated to their studies, dreaming of a successful career since childhood. They met in college and discovered in each other the same passion. John loved studying as much as Michele did, and she loved working as much as he did. Together they were building a promising future, full of dreams, travels, and above all, hard work. They planned to live abroad, and the profession they chose allowed for it. Traveling the world for work and being together was their greatest goal. However, even before they finished college, Michele discovered she was pregnant. It was a complete shock. Arguments began to arise in what was once a perfect relationship, and the couple even considered giving the baby up for adoption soon after birth. Months passed, and still undecided about what to do with the baby, they decided to tell their family about the situation, knowing they couldn't hide the pregnancy for much longer. During a large dinner organized by Michele's parents, they announced the new family member on the way. Despite the initial shock, the future grandparents were happy with the news. They had always wanted a grandchild, just not so soon. After much discussion, John and Michele explained their situation and indecision about what to do with the baby. The grandparents then made a proposal. Fearing they might lose the future grandchild to adoption or abortion, they offered to raise the baby until the parents finished college and stabilized. They found the proposal perfect and accepted. Natan was born and, from early on, was surrounded by his grandparents' love. In his early years, he hardly lived with his parents, moving in with them only at the age of 5. He was a cheerful boy, always with a smile on his face. He didn't quite understand why he hadn't lived with his parents before, but he knew from his grandparents that they worked a lot. However, Natan found the first few weeks living with his parents strange. He received little attention, played less, and felt more lonely and sad. On a sunny afternoon, he looked out the window of his room and saw that the weather was perfect for playing in the yard, as he used to do with his grandparents. He ran to his parents' room to wake them up and invite them to play outdoors. However, the response Natan received was nothing like what he expected. "I can't right now, Natan. Do you think your mother and I give you this life of luxury for free?" "It's not all playtime. You can be sure of that," John bellowed. Natan's smile disappeared instantly. He returned to his room, sad, while his parents, John and Michele, discussed what had happened. "My parents spoiled this boy too much. I have no patience for this," complained Michele. "Tell me about it, honey." "Neither do I," replied John. John and Michele were so focused on their work that they barely had time for Natan. They even hired a nanny who spent more time with him than his own parents. Natan felt increasingly lonely and sad each day. And no matter what happened, he couldn't rely on his parents. Family Day celebrations at school were always very sad for Natan. No one from his family ever came. His parents were always working, and his grandparents were too old and sick to leave the house. Often, Natan begged his grandmother to let him go back to live with her, but she was already very weak. She suffered from Alzheimer's, and his grandfather had Parkinson's. The only constant company he had was the nanny, but she wasn't loving and was only there for the money. As time went on, the situation began to improve a little. Both John and Michele became more stable in their work and in a more comfortable financial situation, which allowed them to give a little more attention to Natan. This was enough for the boy, who was immensely happy with every crumb of affection he received. His parents continued to be impatient, always making excuses to avoid spending quality time with him. To make matters worse, John and Michele started making new plans, including having another child. Natan was excited about the idea of having a little brother or sister, imagining that he would always have someone to play with at home. And so it happened. Michele became pregnant again, this time with a planned pregnancy, and months later Ellen was born, a girl. Natan was very happy about his sister's birth, but he soon realized that his parents were distancing him from her. They were so focused on the new baby, Ellen, that he began to be increasingly sidelined. "Get out of here, insolent boy! Leave your sister alone!" shouted Michele. "But, Mom, I just wanted to spend a little time with her and give her a kiss," said Natan, tears in his eyes. "Of course not. You're so gross. Your sister is our little princess," replied Michele. And so, Natan was further separated from his sister. If Ellen cried when he was around, he was blamed and often scolded. To make matters worse, he no longer had his grandparents to play with, as they had passed away about a year before Ellen was born, leaving him even lonelier. At school, Natan had only one friend he enjoyed playing with. However, his mother rarely allowed the two to play together, claiming that Ted didn't have a bright future because his family was humble and didn't have much money. Natan's life became increasingly lonely and difficult, while his parents focused on the new baby, and he saw his few joys being constantly denied. As time passed, Natan grew up, always being humiliated and rejected by his parents. His younger sister, Ellen, learned from John and Michele to treat Natan poorly. When something bad happened, to avoid punishment, Ellen would blame Natan, and their parents believed her without questioning. If anyone asked about Natan, John and Michele responded with disdain, "He's a very difficult boy. We'll be lucky if he becomes someone in life." Even if Natan got the highest grades in school, his parents never acknowledged his efforts. "Aren't you ashamed of cheating on the test?" accused John. "Dad, I never cheated. I studied hard to get an A+ in math," Natan replied, trying to defend himself. But his father never believed his words. Natan had already won several math Olympiads, national competitions where only the best students participated. He was so intelligent that he had created a robot capable of jumping and doing somersaults with a simple voice command. On the other hand, Ellen was one of the worst students in school. She often got suspended, but her parents always downplayed the situation. They never scolded her. On the contrary, they rewarded her and reassured her that everything would be fine, feeding her arrogance. The injustice was clear and painful for Natan. Despite his efforts and achievements, he continued to be treated as a burden, while Ellen, who did not make an effort and caused problems, was always forgiven and rewarded. Finally, Natan graduated from high school and secured a full scholarship at the country's top university. He was reaping the rewards of his hard work and couldn't have been happier. However, the college was on the other side of the country, and he couldn't afford an apartment there. He asked his parents for help, but once again they refused, saying that if he wanted to study outside the city, he should support himself because he was now a man and needed to be independent. This reaction didn't surprise Natan. He had expected it from his parents and had already secured a job in the city where he would move. Natan got a job at a bar. He worked nights and attended college in the mornings. He didn't receive calls from his parents and realized that if their relationship was already bad when they lived in the same house, now that he was in another city, it would be even worse. He called home every week, even though his parents rarely answered. He left messages on the answering machine saying that he loved them, and telling them how the new stage of life was going, working to support the apartment he shared with 3 college mates. But he was happy. Natan found it difficult to trust people, so he didn't have any friends in the new city. He only had those he shared the apartment with, but even then, they weren't friends he truly trusted. The lack of genuine emotional support made adapting to his new life even more challenging. He felt trapped in a cycle of loneliness, unable to open up. But there was a girl named Vivian who always tried to strike up a conversation with Natan. They had already worked on some college assignments together, but Natan was always very direct and didn't give much room to talk about his personal life. Vivian was also very intelligent and noticed that Natan had no friends. So, she made an effort to become friends with him. She saw something special in Natan and wanted to help him come out of his shell, offering him the friendship and support he so desperately needed. Years passed, and the youngest sister, Ellen, graduated from high school a year late because she didn't get a high enough grade to pass and had to repeat the year. Ellen always hated school and studying, becoming very rebellious in the last years of high school, even being taken to the police station a few times. But their parents continued to spoil her. On a rainy day, Natan was at home with his best friend Vivian when he received an unexpected phone call. He looked at the screen of his phone in disbelief. His mother was calling. Emotionally, he thought, could they want to try to reconnect? He answered the call. His mother asked how he was and if he was busy at that moment. Natan began to tell her about his life, but he was soon interrupted. His mother started talking about the problems they were facing. They had closed 5 out of 6 businesses, sold their cars, and were on the brink of bankruptcy. Natan promptly asked how he could help, showing concern. His mother then asked if he could make a monthly deposit for them until the company stabilized again, which she said wouldn't take long. Natan agreed. Shortly after, Michele said, "Thank you, son. We love you very much, and we're trusting you." Natan hung up the phone in disbelief, as he had never heard such affectionate words from his parents. The following month, he received a message from Michele asking for a larger amount than before. Natan wasn't too worried, as he was financially comfortable due to his hard work at his job. Even though he had already spent a large portion of his savings on the first deposit, he was so happy with the monthly messages and calls from his parents that he simply deposited the money without questioning it. His friend Vivian, knowing about his problematic relationship with his family, found this sudden interest strange. Vivian created a fake profile on a social network to try to get closer to Ellen. When Vivian accessed Ellen's photos, she was shocked. She called Natan to see them, knowing that words alone wouldn't be enough to convince him. The photos showed Ellen in luxury hotels and posing with cars that her mother had said they had sold. Ellen was studying at one of the most expensive universities in the country and taking frequent trips to Europe. John and Michele were simply taking advantage of their son. Outraged, Natan decided to stop making the monthly deposits. John, furious, called to ask why the money hadn't been deposited. Natan explained what he had seen and said he wouldn't send any more money, which sparked a huge outburst from his father. "You're ungrateful. We gave you everything and this is how you repay us? We raised you for years. Your grandparents would surely be disappointed." Without saying anything in response, Natan hung up the phone. In reality, Natan's parents were indeed on the brink of bankruptcy, but not because of their businesses. It was due to Ellen's exorbitant spending on luxuries and trips. A few months later, his parents did go bankrupt, having to cut off all of Ellen's benefits, which left her furious. Ellen never graduated from the expensive university, and, with the remaining money, she fled to London, where she married a wealthy young man and never returned. The parents tried to rebuild the business, but without success. They had to sell the house and moved into a rented apartment. Over the years, Natan became very successful and founded a multinational IT company with branches all over the world. Meanwhile, John and Michele grew old alone in a nursing home for the elderly. without the love of either of their children and forgotten.